This is the Amp Hour Podcast. Released January 8th, 2023. Episode 614. Reunion impedance matching and 2023 predictions. Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Chris Gamble of Contextual Electronics.
And I'm Alvaro from the Unnamed Reverse Engineering Podcast.
And I'm Ariel Briner from Electron Labs.
And I'm Chris Osterwood from Capable Robot Components.
And this is a reunion show. Welcome back. You guys have all been on the show before.
I think so.
Thank you.
Been a while, yeah.
It's nice to be back.
Yeah. You saved my bacon. I had a guest cancel, and you guys came to my rescue. And now we're going to talk about the state of electronics in 2023. So we'll see where this goes. I don't know. First, in the same order that you just introduced yourselves, let's get a little update. What's new and hot in your worlds? Where are you guys working? What are you working on? We'll get about what you're excited about later. But since the last time you've been on the show, perhaps any major life changes people should know about.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Yeah, I don't know when the last time I was on, but
so many times.
Yeah. People might remember from other podcasts, but many years ago, I was at Apple. Then I went to Planet Labs, and then I rage quit, and I took a 5-month sabbatical and traveled the world, and it was great. So I decided to do that again, and I quit my job. I was working at Loon and at Google X. It used to be an X company. I decided to quit my job to travel, and so my last day was March 3rd, 2020. So that didn't really work.
Yeah, that
out
worked out well, huh?
Yeah, it worked out great. So I had a sabbatical for 5 months in my apartment, and then I got a job where I am now doing ocean science stuff. So I write firmware for buoys that are
cool
all over the ocean measuring things.
Yeah, and I think you've talked about that. I think you went back on Embedded maybe and talked about that at some point, or
I have no idea. It's been 2.5 years.
He's a
now,
frequent podcaster, so yeah, it's very possible to find Alvaro stuff on
I've done a few conference talks that on it is mostly about me troubleshooting things and how to fix things, but related to the work. And I do have a podcast that I sometimes record.
Cool. I'm feeling that. All right.
Oh, me next.
Yes.
Chris, I was last on the show in 2015.
Okay.
So it's been a little while. And back then, I was running my wildly successful startup, Cartesian Code. No, that was not successful. Printing circuit boards, you may remember. You were trying to get me to print a circuit board on your arm. I'm sorry, that never ended up happening.
Oh, yeah, it didn't. Well, I'm sure you still have some in the basement or something. You probably have a printer somewhere. We can get it to go.
Yeah, sure, totally, yeah. I didn't get rid of all of them out of spite. But since then, a lot has happened. There's not time to catch up on all of it. But I worked at a couple of startups, one of them being Zipline, doing drone delivery, emergency medical delivery via drone. Yep. I joined a consulting company called PCH International, and then I left PCH to go and do independent contracting. And that became Electron Labs, my company now. And over the last 2.5 years, that has grown. We currently have a headcount of 8. So it's really snowballed on me.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. Awesome.
Thank you.
And Chris, what about you?
So I think the last time I was on, I was about to launch the USB hub that I've been working on Crowd Supply. That launched actually at the Teardown conference that they hosted in 2019. That went very well, and been working on a bunch of different things since then, working with Ant Micro on some embedded JITs and carrier baseboards, synchronization systems, camera systems, and now back to USB hubs and working on the new generation of those. Still doing Capable Robot Components and still building stuff here in Exeter.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, how is the robot market, I guess? That is like a thing that I guess pops up. Every list of the future is robotics. And I was just listening to things about Japan losing workers and, there's all like we can't hire people in the US at least, and so they always talk about automation, but is that coming true? I mean, Alvaro, Ariel, you guys seeing that stuff too? I mean, robotics is robotics going to be a thing, a bigger thing?
It will continue to be a bigger thing. I don't think globally we're going to see like a hockey stick growth in robotics like we have in like the internet taking off or anything like that. But it is a very useful approach to solving many different kinds of problems, and where the safety and price and performance and flexibility of automation or lack thereof makes sense, it will be well employed. But yeah, I mean, demand for automation is going to continue.
The other two guys live in San Francisco, and I think they would have the reflex to like be like ready to pitch to an investor, be like, "Oh yes, it's gonna explode next year." Like I think you're just living too east. You're living that East Coast life, Chris.
This is why I've never moved to California, I guess. Yeah, I mean, 2023 is not the year of Linux on the desktop. To use an old phrase.
No, that was last year.
That's right.
Okay,
We've achieved it.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, this is an area of growth. I wouldn't say rapid growth, but in particular niches, there definitely will be rapid growth for particular verticals. So yeah, I'm continue to be very excited about building robotic components, about the industry writ large, and about like the democratization of it. Things are easier than ever to build. There's more that you can do at a lower budget. Development timelines are decreasing, but still long. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity out there. There's still a lot of dirty, dull, and dangerous jobs that could benefit from automation, and flexible and intelligent automation, not just repeat the same thing ad nauseum like a robot arm in a factory.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. All right. Well,
I was going to say, I was thinking, just pulling up like my list of clients. It's difficult to keep track of how many clients we've had.
Flex. Are we talking about flex circuits here, or just we're just going to flex that much?
I just wanted to count how many of them were robotics, because
okay.
I'm trying to think how many clients have come to me recently, or clients we've had over the last like 2.5 years that have been robotics companies. I don't think it's any of them. So maybe that's just me personally. I'm not appealing.
Well, it could also be the location. I mean, I'm guessing you probably get a lot of Bay Area interest because there's a
half of my clients are robotics. I have 2 clients, so I am doing some robotics.
This is good. I wanted to know, Alvaro, are you seeing more than me? So I guess you are.
I'm seeing one.
That's the other thing too. I wonder about, like in a consulting context generally as well, like it does feel like robots are often very vertically integrated. Maybe they're buying components from like a capable robot, but Chris's company, to be a system integrator in certain parts of it. But it does seem like, it doesn't seem like they're kind of subcontracted out here and there, where if it is a, I think about like the Amazon factory robots, those seem like they're all one unit and they're just kind of made by that company. Maybe that's wrong though. I don't know.
I think it varies a lot by the domain, the constraints of size, weight, and power in that domain. Like if if you're really constrained in those regards, it's harder to integrate off-the-shelf components, and you need to go to a more embedded and integrated design, which makes it more difficult to integrate outside components or outside firms in your development. But it's possible. The whole point of why I started Capable Robot Components is I saw this gap in the market between building everything in-house yourself or buying things off the shelf that were designed for other markets. So the whole point of this company is to create a whole suite of components that are easier to integrate and more purpose-built for robotics, but still flexible for use in a wide variety of different kinds of robotic applications. So, there's a nice middle ground there, but I don't think many companies are aiming for it. So there's still an underserved part of the market there. But, I think, from a consulting perspective, I think there is lots of opportunity to help robotics companies get to market faster. The power systems in these things are not that different from other sorts of power systems in other kinds of high power electronics. Same thing with radios and computing and cameras. And, if you have expertise in a particular vertical within this domain, not from an end user perspective, but a technology vertical, I think there's absolutely opportunity to work with robotics companies to help them bring to market products sooner.
Yeah. I always see like, so I should mention CES is going on right now, and I'm kind of viewing it from afar via social media. And it's like, every time I see robotics kind of in popular media and, just, it seems like really trite, but I feel like that's also because that's what gets covered, especially at a CES. You think about like the things doing the hard work in the robotics realm are probably the stuff that I'm not seeing. Really, if you broaden it to automation, then it's like, oh, that really explodes. Automation versus just robotics. Yeah. I mean, Alvaro, that's like, you're basically doing buoy automation, right?
Yeah, I mean, remote sensing. We're measuring things that no humans could reasonably do.
Send an intern in a dinghy out into
Yeah.
the ocean, peanut butter sandwich, and
We're
a
seeing like
couple jugs of water.
15 meter waves off the coast of California.
Holy
That would not
crap!
be fun.
Yeah,
That's
oh
like
yeah, you
40
guys are getting
some
like
feet
super weather, right?
for the Americans.
For freedom units, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that's just the recent storm, or like regularly?
Yeah, it's a current one.
Oh wow. Woo. Yeah, you guys are getting slammed. I guess we should mention, if people are listening to this later and you haven't looked at the title, this is being recorded in January 2023. Yeah,
well,
so
we're going to be getting just lots of water over the next couple of weeks, which is rare, but we'll take it.
Yeah. Awesome. Grow us some food, please. I hear you guys do that.
It might be drowned, so we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, that's like ag tech's a sector that I'm doing reference designs for like ag tech type stuff. And like, it's just, and I'm sure, Ariel, you probably see stuff in that space too, right? Or just generally consulting, robotics. That's kind of where it all comes together. A lot of that stuff kind of comes together in an industrial way, in like a very practical manner. But it's just like, it's so not insular, but kind of insular. It's just like, there's so many big providers that they just go and design their own stuff. And some of them buy it off the shelf, and some independent farmers need that stuff. But it's like, it's like its own industry by itself.
Sort of modeling itself a little bit after the like automotive industry, where it's all very insular.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that.
Yeah, just connecting that back to CES, I saw today, I've not watched the whole keynote, but apparently John Deere did a big part of the CES keynote talking about their automated tractor development and rollout. So yeah, I mean, there definitely are frivolous robotics at CES. I would say the vast majority of robotics displayed there are rather frivolous, but there is sort of the real productive robotics on display there as well, which is nice to see.
I suppose, unlike many other industries that we would deal with, robotics is one where there's a practical application of it, but then there's also a marketing application of it, and they're pretty disconnected from each other, right? You get to same thing you were saying, Chris, where you're seeing a lot of stuff in the news about robotics, but that's usually these like trite examples that are flashy. Yeah. I mean,
or not even always flashy, but I think graspable, right? That's what I would think about. Sure. Like the one we talked about in the show a couple months ago now was the tortilla cooking and deep frying robot, basically. Like that's going into like fast food restaurants. And it's like, because people can understand the end application. You don't have to be like, oh, well, this is like a robotic combine. It's like, oh, what's a combine? You don't have to ask that. Like, people know what tortilla chips are, and that's like, oh, I like those. Yeah, Chipotle.
Oh, you just reminded me of I just remembered I have had one robotics client.
Oh yeah,
just one of the robotic barista companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, that was my very first one. It's such a long time ago now, I forgot. But I'm looking at my list, and I'm like, oh yeah, there we go. That's the one on the list.
And what was it? What part of the barista process was it automating?
Well, if you've seen any of the robotic baristas, it's a robot arm that basically moves a cup back and forth between the customer and standard coffee machine, right? Like an espresso machine. So it was doing that. It was automating the process of putting a cup under an espresso machine nozzle and then bringing it to the customer in a very novel fashion.
Yeah, they have one at the airport here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May or may not have been the one.
I think that's the thing. Like, that's like kind of like general robotics hits specialized robotics, and that's still on the general side of things, probably because they didn't want to develop a fully custom solution, or there wasn't enough of a market need for that sort of thing. It's just like, what can you get funding for versus what can you actually make money at it. I'm amazed that people make money at coffee in general, personally. I mean, it's crazy to me, but it's obviously very addictive and needed, and, growing market, I guess.
And if you were to design something purpose built for that in an integrated way, it wouldn't be interesting to watch at all if you were the end customer, right? There would be a box and out would pop your perfect cup of coffee.
It would be the vending machine that delivers coffee, right?
Yeah.
This
exists.
It would just taste better. Yeah. More of that.
I did have to laugh when I saw those robotic pizza startups a couple years ago with like a robotic kitchen to make a pizza as some like new invention that they have graced to the world. And like, what do you think? Like, where do you think the frozen pizza in your grocery store comes from? Like, that is a factory built pizza done way more efficiently than any of these Silicon Valley startups doing it, on demand.
But you don't get to see that.
You don't get to see it. That's true.
Speaking of robotic food things, at the last 3H meetup here in the Bay Area, we did it at a food truck park, and they do have one food truck that's a robot, but the food truck doesn't make the food; it just plates it. So they bring in the pre-made food, and then you kind of select what you want. It'll mix it, warm it, and put it in a plate for you. But you don't know that, right?
I think the ultimate like San Francisco startup would be that, except underneath it's just like a struggling artist with a costume robot arm, behind the curtain, and they're just moving it in a robotic fashion.
So they did do that during Halloween at one of my old jobs. I was sharing space with a company that made these robots, and somebody dressed up as a robot arm, and somebody pushed them around in a rolling chair and walked around with a laptop behind them taking notes.
Nice. Yep. It's pretty good stuff.
At Modex a couple years ago, and Modex is a big trade show for fulfillment and automation and fulfillment, and I saw a demo of a robot arm piecemeal sorting application where they were taking like a stack of stuff and putting it into bins to sort it all out. And they were, they kept talking about how good their AI was and how good their vision was and machine recognition of everything. And you walk around to the back of the booth and you see a guy sitting in a chair with a laptop watching all of these different cameras and clicking on what the robot arm should pick up. It's like, it was literally pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, except there wasn't even a curtain. Like, he was just there next to the machine running it.
Training the models.
Curtains are so expensive at trade shows. Like, they charge you a robot arm and a leg for that. So yeah. Well, I've become a dad since the last time you guys have been on the show, so
Oh, sorry.
Dad jokes are allowed now. It's part of my birthright.
They are required now.
Yeah.
Not yours, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. What about other trends? I mean, so robots always make the list. What else are you guys seeing in the marketplace?
I'm not the only one doing IoT.
That is correct.
Yeah.
You are not the only one.
I'm doing industrial IoT or the ocean of things, but yeah, my life is remote sensing, satellite communication, cellular, and because of that, I talk to other folks who are doing the same stuff. But I know y'all are also in that kind of area, and it just keeps growing.
Mm. Yes.
Yeah, lots of IoT interest. I'm quoting on another IoT project right now.
Okay. Is that how much of this? So you have many clients, I hear, which I'm very glad for you. How many of those products are connected versus not? I mean, so Alvaro and I both work on connected stuff all the time, but so you have kind of a broader swath. How many of those are talking to the web?
So to put some perspective on it, over the last 2.5 years, while I've been growing Electron Labs, for a lot of that time it was just me. Right, and then I've only really grown the head count in the last year.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't making fun of you. I like it. That's good. I want you to be successful. Come on, man.
Thank you. But in that time, we've had just over a dozen clients, I think, with like multiple projects per client, usually, sometimes just one. And I'm going over the list, trying to calculate in my head like how many of these were IoT. Probably like a third of them.
Yeah.
Or how many of them were connected? Probably half of them. I mean, one of them was like hardcore networking equipment. So
yeah, right.
Do you define that as connected?
Yes, I would. Yeah.
It does the connection. So yeah, almost all of them are connected. So it's where everything's going.
Yeah, like whether or not I think the other piece is like, because from my experience in the consulting world too, it's like often you're called in to do this thing and build this piece that like Chris is doing too, right? Where you're basically making like an appliance that goes into something else. Does the end customer necessarily have a connected business? Well, like, are they making money off that connection? Maybe not. But but if it's still part of the overall setup, then yeah, I'd still list it as, if you're making a display board for a device that's connected to the internet through a Linux computer, like, yeah, I'd still say it's a connected device, even though you're doing a part of it that's maybe not connected,
Yeah, fair enough. I'm interested to see what you guys have found, like, for number of inbounds. Like, we've seen a lot of layoffs recently, right? And we've seen a really cooling of the tech sector. And I'm wondering if you guys have noticed that with the amount of inbounds you've been getting, with the amount of work, how many people have been beating down your doors. I have definitely noticed a downward trend in amount of interest, But luckily, that's only gone from when I couldn't handle it at all. It was overwhelming to now it's just the right amount for our headcount.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, for work, our customers are mostly industrial or scientific, so those haven't really noticed, I guess, because they think in years. But personally, I don't like the clients I have where somebody asked or connected me to them. I'm not really looking for work.
So you've got the same clients you've had for a while. You've got like long-term
I had one
clients.
client for a couple of years, and then he told his friend, like, "Hey, you should talk to Alvaro." And now I'm working for the other one.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And I think some of this is hard to separate from the normal yearly cycles of people, doing end of year wrap up instead of beginning of year planning. And, there's not a bunch of people kicking off projects in Q4 generally.
Yeah.
Sort of a tidy everything up, finish things out, get ready for the new year, and then start the new 2023 efforts in Q1. So
I've been surprised by down cycles in the past too, where it's like sometimes the hiring a consultant is actually because they did lay off people internally. That's
exactly
also a possibility.
Oh, that's happening for sure.
Yeah,
that's I was wondering if you guys had that same experience.
Yeah, they want flexible labor, that sort of thing. That makes a lot of sense. But personally, I'm not actively soliciting, so I'm not even. Yeah, nothing for me on that front.
The only down cycle I went through was at the beginning of 2020, and in that instance, I only had one client at the time. I'd only just started independent contracting, and that client laid off a bunch of their full-time employees, and then gave me a bunch more work because they didn't have the full-time employees anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting that to happen again, but that's what I was kind of been surprised. I haven't really seen that over the last couple of months, but I think what you said, Chris, makes a lot of sense. It's more of a yearly cycle that's impacting things.
And I think the companies that just did layoffs, which is a lot of them, they're probably still realizing how much work there is to do because there was the holidays, and it's probably the folks that are left are trying to get stuff done, and then they're going to realize they can't do it, and then they're going to go looking.
That makes sense.
What about what else in the IoT sector? So Alvaro, I mean, you're connecting stuff to satellites. That's interesting. That's actually an emergent thing that I've seen. I was really surprised about phones are starting to talk to satellites too. I've seen articles about it.
Yep.
I don't have fancy phones, so I don't know how that works. But
the new iPhones can do Globalstar.
Okay.
And I think T-Mobile is working with Starlink. And then I also heard that what's the other one? Iridium. It's going to start working. They didn't say with who, but I think it was Scott Manley on YouTube was speculating it'd be Samsung. But yeah, that's becoming a thing.
It only took them 30 years from the elliptical orbits or whatever it was called, that book where they talked about phones regularly connected to the satellites.
That was a pretty good book. Yeah, I don't expect to be doing web browsing with satellite internet on your phone. It's at best it's going to be text messages, I think. For example, the modems we use Iridium, which is the best constellation right now if you just want to send messages from anywhere in the world at any time. But they have the SBD modems, like short burst data. So I can send 340 bytes up and get 240 bytes down per message. And it takes a lot of power to do it.
Oh, yeah. How much are we talking here?
Like over a watt to transmit over several seconds. And that's when it actually gets through.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. You have to do it multiple times to, do you get confirmations back down or no?
So you'll know if the message was transmitted successfully. The problem is you can't just receive messages. So in order to receive data, you have to send data. So you have to check in with the satellite to get anything back. So downloading is extremely expensive. So we don't do firmware updates over satellite just because of cost, both in power and data. But we also do cellular now. So for the coastal applications, we can actually do firmware updates.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. And is it Cat M1 or is it Cat 1 or what?
I think we're using the Blues.io, the node cards.
Yeah. Yep.
And cool. It's been I have fixed a few bugs in their code, but they've been fantastic. Just weird ones where we get a customer in Chile, they get the unit, and then it's just crashing, and occasionally we get some reports into the crash, but it's just kind of not quite a boot loop, but every hour or so it crashes, and eventually, long story short, the cell tower the name of the location had an accent in it, which was a Unicode character. And,
Oh no.
and then their driver was ignoring.
Extraño.
Well, it thought it was noise because they had a very naive filter. So if the character of the byte was 0 or greater than 127, they're like, oh, this must be UART noise. But no, yeah, Unicode characters can happily be 232, and so it was crashing, and so that was a fun one to debug remotely.
I should mention we had Ray Ozzie on the show of Blues Wireless. That's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of that stuff
So,
early days.
yeah.
Now he has a team of people.
Yeah, it's great.
But he still he looks at my pull requests and merges them in.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Alvaro, that reminds me of my favorite weird field bug ever, which was back when I was doing sewer robots. We got a report from a field crew that they found a street where the operator control unit, the OCU, would blue screen. And we're like, oh, come on.
In that street.
On that street. Yeah. What a street. And we're like, come on. Like, what's going on out there?
Wacky pattern matching.
Yeah, exactly. So we sent them a new rugged laptop. They went back to that location later that week. They said, yep, same thing's happening. This street crashes the laptop. So we send our software engineer out and he reproduces the problem. You go to this street, the laptop blue screens.
Oh, wait a second. Let's all take some guesses here. What is it, guys?
Does it have GPS?
No GPS. Yeah. Well, no, there was GPS. We were recording locations of the manholes that we were inspecting.
It's got to be something like somebody's Wi-Fi network, right?
Yeah, Wi-Fi network.
Yes, that is the button. Yep. So there was someone on that street that had the empty character as their SSID name.
Oh my god!
Null string.
Yeah.
And whatever version of Windows and whatever version of the 802.11b driver we were using 12 years ago couldn't handle that and would blue screen the whole Windows laptop when you would get that null character SSID. So
it'll be fixed in Windows 12.
Yeah, it was a location specific blue screen of death.
I put emojis in all my SSIDs and then it keeps most of the IoT stuff out of it because they can't connect.
Well, do you think that was malicious on the part of the access point operator?
They probably just didn't want to be visible.
Yeah, I think they were trying to be hidden and they didn't know that there were other ways of doing that.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a good
But yeah, Unicode, man. It's great, but
it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
I think the international thing too, like you mentioned, was Chile, right? So when your product gets to the point where it is actually expanding outside your home territory, you can test so many things, but you just don't know everything you're going to run into until you do start going more. Obviously, your thing is literally drifting, but if you get into a new market or something, there's going to be a bunch of new things that might crop up as a result of that.
I mean, I can tell you a couple other weird bugs that could only have been tested by moving, and one of them was GPS. Everything looks fine, the units are reporting in, and then we test our buoys out Ocean Beach, so go around the Golden Gate and out to the ocean, and we moor them out there for testing. And the unit we took, everything was fine until we took it out there, and then the position reported was like way off, and then it restarted and everything was fine again, and then we couldn't reproduce it. And the only way to reproduce it was to move that buoy in a particular direction. And what would happen is we had, because of the data restrictions, we do bit packing. So if it takes 11 bits to describe a location, call it, we're only going to send 11 bits. We're not going to round it up to 2 bytes. And the bit packing function was expecting to have a buffer full of zeros. So it would only set the ones, it would not clear the zeros. So as it moved, the ones would get set, and then I kept moving, and more ones would get set, and more ones would get set, and it would just get thrown out.
Accumulator
completely.
Issue, huh?
Yeah, and that was the only way that we could have tested that. I didn't. I don't know how with spoof GPS data, perhaps.
That's crazy. I would love to hear more about your. So Alvaro, I know you do free RTOS.
Yep.
Not sure about Chris and Ariel, what you guys are doing for. I feel like my personal experience has been with RTOSs this year. That's been like my year of learning RTOSs. So I kind of see them everywhere, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, what do you guys see in terms of levels of processing? I remember Chris also said something about the CM4 in an email we had before this. as well. So like, where in the software stack of the worlds are you guys living?
Yeah, I can go with I've been using free RTOS for like over 2 years now. We did take a look at Zephyr, but I vetoed it because for a different project. But one is to stay in the same thing for all of our projects, but the other one is it's great if you're doing things in kind of the domain of Zephyr, but if you try to do like ultra low power on a platform that's not been developed or do things different way, it's a lot more complex. But we're doing everything free RTOS these days, and yeah, you have to write your own drivers. It doesn't come with drivers. That's the nice thing is Zephyr. It comes with everything.
Not everything, but yeah, a
Well,
lot of
everything.
more. It comes with more. Yeah,
I mean, it takes like half an hour to clone the repo the first time, which kind of drove me crazy. But free RTOS, we're doing Cortex M4. Actually, now we're doing M33 for a new product, and it's the STM32U5 series, which is kind of neat.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah. I'd love to get into parts too. What you guys are using it for parts? That could very easily be tied to RTOSs and.
Well, it's which parts can you get, and that's why we're switching to the U5 because it's newer, and I think less people have designed it in. So that was a trick.
Yeah.
Counter to Alvaro, we have been using Zephyr across two of our projects recently, but they haven't. I agree with you. I would not want to do this when we're power limited or trying to do ultra low power. These are both plugged into the wall products, so that's just like it's much easier. It's much more straightforward.
Absolutely. Yeah. We for prototyping, the team was using Zephyr, and they were able to get network stack up and running and all that stuff. But as soon as we started looking at power and performance, we were trying to use some high-speed communicate. Well, 10 megabit, but high-speed communications. It started getting very complicated to debug, figure out where things are slowing down, and then the power management was going to be rough.
Yeah,
but
I would not want to attempt that with Zephyr. That sounds awful.
Yeah, but if you're doing like a Bluetooth sensor on an NRF 52 or 53, that's probably the best use case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's how most people are coming into Zephyr these days too. It's just Nordic is kind of leading the charge. Obviously, they're not the only ones in the project, but like that is most people that I would take a very educated guess that Ariel is probably also doing some Nordic stuff. Most people aren't choosing Zephyr out of just for funsies, but maybe you don't know.
Yeah, actually, we're running. I can't think right now of what it's running on the second project because I haven't been involved technically with that one for a while. But the one I can remember are actually running on an STM32.
Oh, there you go. Prove me wrong. All right. Great.
But that was because it was like our internal favorite already at that point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And they do have pretty good support for their peripherals for STM32. Like they even had the U5, which is pretty new that they had that supported. Having said that, the U5 has a lot of really cool, weird features that I don't think are supported, and I'm going to have a hard time getting it to work just because they're so complex. But you can do DMA in stop mode. So even when the processor's which is bizarre, but it has a low power DMA that it'll do magical things. Because usually people think, oh, DMA, it's going to be low power. It's like, no, your clocks still have to be running. Mm-hmm. But this one has a special DMA that can power down most of your clocks and just do the DMA in your peripheral. But these are so obscure of features that you can't generalize them, so you have to do it all custom, and that's where it starts breaking down.
What would you guys say your hardware software split is these days as well? I mean, that's another thing. I feel like that's depends on where you're focusing in on, but obviously this is a hardware mostly show, but I'm digging more into firmware, and Dave does a little bit of firmware here and there, and it's just like you can't escape it these days. So I'm always curious about what the percentage of time people are spending on different things like that.
Professionally, I'd say it's 95% firmware. We have a hardware team, and I'll do board bring up and troubleshooting. That's kind of hardware-ish, but most of my hardware is on my side projects, and I'll make tools for work by myself, like be able to debug SWD over USB-C, so I don't have to bring a 10-pin connector, or I've been making front plates for the new dual scope, which kind of basic. Yeah. And then the last thing I made was a USB cable tester, just because it makes me angry when there's charge-only cables.
I guess my time is mainly, it's pretty well split. I mean, it sort of depends on the week or the month. This year I've done a fair bit of FPGA work, a lot of embedded development, a bunch of Linux development, and a bunch of hardware design. So it's sort of been all over the map. And on the embedded software side, I started playing around with Rust on microcontrollers for the first time for real this year, and excited to be doing more of that. There's a bunch of different paths and options there, and I'm still sort of exploring that landscape, but had one effort recently that used an ESP32C3, the RISC-V, ESP32.
Yeah.
And Espresso's done a good job of porting the standard Rust library to that part. So you can actually do like thread.spawn and mutexes, and the full standard library basically exists for that target. You're not down in the weeds with like an embedded no standard Rust. It was pretty feature rich, and so I was able to develop a fairly simple power-ons monitoring watchdog kind of system for a main processor on this little ESP32C3 in a couple hundred lines of Rust, and works really, really well, really stable.
Awesome.
And it was easy to debug, easy to write. I was impressed.
They also have pretty awesome logging capabilities. I was talking to the folks over at Oxide, and actually, I think it was a Memfall did a local meetup, but they were saying how, and there's some libraries to do this in C, but usually, we put printfs in our code, and then it goes over UART or USB, but it's really slow. You're not supposed to do interrupts, and it takes up all your flash space. And there's a Rust library that lets you do all these logging prints, but they don't get compiled into the binary. It's just kind of symbols.
Oh,
and then
nice.
You're only basically sending pointers to the strings, even though the thing they point to is not in the microcontroller itself. You have it on the other side. So now you're only sending a few bytes back and forth for very verbose messaging or logging in very lightweight and fast way.
That's cool.
I'm actually looking at using their Hubris embedded RTOS for a new project.
Yeah.
So I've not actually started using it yet, but I've got the hardware in design right now, and I've chosen a chip that they're already using on their backplane system, so that it should be fairly easy to port their whole embedded RTOS repo over to this new application.
This is for folks who don't know the Oxide Computer Company's RTOS for that's written in Rust.
Yeah, it's called
people
Hubris.
may remember Laura Abbott has been on the show talking about all of this stuff. So,
and I'm sure you've had Rick Alter on as well, right?
I'm not sure. Boy, it's
I
been
think
a while.
so.
MX Shift.
Yes. Yeah, but before he was here, I think before he was at Oxide.
Well,
yes, he was talking most about cars.
Yes,
his car.
That's right.
Car
I
stuff.
do love
yes,
that their custom debugger is named Humility, which is it's just an amazing pairing of words. Have the RTOS called Hubris and the debugger called Humility.
Sounds like we have the full spectrum of breakdowns between hardware and firmware then, because I market Electron Labs as primarily hardware engineering, primarily electrical engineering. And we just do a little bit of firmware engineering where necessary. I think that's probably because I personally see myself as being much weaker on the firmware side than the hardware side. I feel comfortable leading a hardware team, but I don't feel comfortable leading a firmware team. So that's why I guess I end up marketing it that way, and that's the type of work we end up getting. The team actually wants me to try and pick up more firmware work. But I'd say at the moment we're like 90%, like EE, mostly focused on circuit board design, and then 10% firmware.
It's hard not to do firmware though, right? Like a lot of things will have a microcontroller on there, and even if it's simple, you have to program something.
I mean, it depends on the size of the client, right? Some clients have
their own team.
Have their own teams. They don't necessarily want you to do it.
Yeah.
But most of the time, if a client is coming to you, it's because they want the whole enchilada, right? They want the whole thing done for them. So I agree with you. It's impossible to
I think it's the most fun clients are the ones that want the whole enchilada. And then in that case, then you definitely need to offer other services and be capable in all of it.
How do you deal with board bring up with those clients where they're doing all the firmware and bring up is kind of a hybrid of the hardware engineer, powering it up, but you also might need firmware support to do it. How do you deal with that?
Alvaro, it's like you're in my brain. Right before we started recording, I was starting to plan out exactly how we're going to do that with one of our clients. So all I can say is what we've done to date, not what I would prefer we do, because I haven't quite figured that out yet. But what we've done to date when they have internal firmware teams is that we will just basically, we'll finish the design, we'll help manage the fab and assembly, we'll get the boards sent. Usually we'll send like either all of them to us or a sample to us and the rest to the client. And then we'll just test the voltage rails, test that we can JTAG scan the chips. That's it. Right. And then
you solder your 30 gauge wire to this QFN over here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So usually what would come out of it is like, oh, okay, well, here's some rework instructions. Send all of your boards back to the shop and have them reworked, and then we'll track them with a new assembly number and we'll send them back to you, and then should be good to start JTagging from that point on. Good luck. Contact us when you find something wrong.
Yeah, that's rough when your power rails are turned on by the microcontroller, right? Like a lot of my jobs in the past, I've been doing firmware, but with hardware. So I the board bring up was my job, and I didn't design it, but I had to get it working, and at least I, had access to the firmware engineer, to the hardware engineer. But having them remote sounds rough if anything goes wrong.
I mean,
for folks that don't know hardware, I guess, because I've worked with firmware engineers like me who come from electrical engineering, so it's not as scary. But also you have the folks that came from software engineering down to firmware, and electrons are terrifying, right? So there's depends on who you're dealing with.
We've been lucky; we haven't had that second type of person yet.
You'll get there.
You're right; that would be a problem. The only time we've really had problems like that with the whole like remote bring up process is when we have a client that is non-technical.
Yeah.
But really wants to insert themselves into the product development process. And wants to like power it up and test it for themselves the first time, or want to involve their team in that. And then it becomes quite a problem. Then we usually end up going to the client site,
I was like, you should charge extra for that. It's like, you want to power it yourself?
Yeah. I've been thinking about various ways that we could like, ship it with a laptop that already has Zoom on it and like a cellular connection. Because inevitably they'll be like, oh gosh, we've had so many times where the client is testing the product in like effectively like a server room that's like too loud to talk inside of. And I want to just ship them some good noise canceling microphone headsets so that we can have a Zoom conversation while they're in. They might not even be in the US, right? They might be in another country.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've gotten real close to shipping like full laptops with a cellular modem.
I mean, at a certain point, you just ship someone, right? I think that's the option.
And then you end up just shipping someone.
Have any of you done embedded Linux systems?
At what level of like all the way?
Like create one, like make a board with an SoC and then get it up and running.
There is a board we're working on at the moment, which I'd have to say is like the most complicated of my career, certainly the most complicated that I've ever come across, which we're working on an Ethernet switch using I think it's Microsemi is the brand, Jaguar SoC, which is just running embedded Linux. But again, we're not doing the firmware for that one. That's one of the companies that has its own internal firmware team. And I mean, the funny thing is they're not even doing the firmware for it because it's too for that part.
Yeah,
because that's too complicated.
That question.
So they brought in a whole.
Yeah, and I think it's also like if you're using like a module, or if you're doing like your own like build all the way to the metal, that's another like defining characteristic. I feel like. So I put like a CM4 on a board, right? But that doesn't. I wouldn't really call that like a Linux system so much as it is an embedded computer that I just need to get the pinouts right, and then everything's
it is. But that one, like you and I know how to. We just put Ubuntu on it, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But that's because Ubuntu comes pre-compiled for it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think when you're doing Yocto or Buildroot or whatever, that's when it gets more complex.
Yeah. The CM4 project I was involved with this year, which is a embedded camera, used Buildroot for the distribution creation, and did a nice power on self test and fail back to the previous image if certain things didn't work on that first boot.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
So, it took a little while to get that all working and make sure that an update, if you interrupted power, would not brick the device, but you test all that thoroughly and it all works well. The build root support for the CM4 is really good, and fairly easy to configure the right kernel and include all the software we needed. And I think I've not done much with Yocto, but my impression at least is that build root you sort of have to do more yourself, but it's a lot simpler than Yocto with all of its giant overlay, systems and.
Yeah, no, Linux is. I'm a Linux user, but I never have developed like things like that.
Chris, this was a project you did for a client?
Yeah, so it's I can't talk much about it yet because my involvement hasn't been published, and at some point the whole project will be open sourced, which is why I was excited to get involved with it.
Cool.
But yeah, it's a embedded camera using the Raspberry Pi high quality camera and the CM4 and a custom carrier that I did and an enclosure. And I sort of got it to the prototype stage, hardware from both electrical, mechanical, and then software. Got it to prototype level and then handed it to a larger team to take it to production and do the industrial design and injection molded enclosures and redesign the electronics for machine robot arm assembly and automated focusing and UV cured staking of the lenses and all of that, which was
that's very cool.
It was a very impressive final product. Way too big of a project for a single person to tackle, but it was neat to be on the sort of the start of that and prove out the concept and get the initial software stack running and do the initial hardware design and bring up.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting question of like how many, like when you're going with a more, I just think Linux systems generally are more complex. I think that's a pretty basic but important statement. But then like, what are minimum team sizes to like properly start to do this sort of thing? Like I feel like embedded small little fiddly bits that I make with little micros, I can handle that myself, right? My code, hardware, production, all that stuff. But then like there are some certain size projects where it just kind of gets, you have to, by necessity, you have to grow it if you want to deliver it in a normal time span.
Yeah, and that also probably depends on experience, right? Like I'm sure if I had worked on 10 embedded Linux projects, I would have kind of a set of tools that I know how to use. Like, build root. Okay, I just need to tweak these things and then speed things up. And I'm sure you could do it with like one or two people, but like you said, it's all about times.
Yeah, I do feel like every time Jay Carlson talks about it, it's like sounds like the simplest thing in the world. I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying right now, Jay.
Yeah, no, exactly. The people do this, and that's why I'm always like, I should try this sometime. But no, after every time I start contemplating it, I'm like, no, I'll just use Ubuntu. That's fine.
Yeah, togetherness.
Chris, I'm impressed that they gave you your clients gave you the like room to work to put that whole build root process together and make it so clean. You must have been working for like very technical clients that they understood the importance and the elegance of the system that you were building.
Yeah,
they were very good clients in many ways. In that particular,
or you didn't tell them about it. Maybe
in that regard, it was it's closer to what Chris is saying, where like we knew that was the right thing to do, so we did it, and
just slow roll.
It just happened, right? But it wasn't like a major thing that we were putting in front of them as here's this giant scope of effort. First, because it wasn't giant, and we knew that if we discussed it too much, it would have gotten pushed down on the priority list. Like everyone agreed it needed to happen prior to product launch, but it helped with testing and bring up and regression testing so much. So I'm really glad that we did that really early on in the prototyping stage so that we had reproducible builds and were able to test different versions of software and different hardware in a really clean way.
So you use the lies to children approach with your client that time?
No, we didn't lie. We just did it up front and
Did you make a DigiWish?
I mean, I definitely do this.
DigiClaws?
I do this kind of thing at work. Well, I know there's something that we, like you mentioned reproducible builds, right? Super important to be able to build the exact same binary on my machine, on the cloud, on someone else's machine, but it takes so long to get it right. And if I told the team like, this is going to take me a month to figure, I mean, not a month, but however long, they'd be like, no, this is not important right now. It's one of those things that I'll sneak off on my own, like a few hours a day for a few weeks, get it working, and then tell everyone, hey, we have reproducible builds, by the way. and nobody will appreciate the amount of work that went into it, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it saves so much time
later on. Yeah.
Later on, yeah.
I don't know, guys. If you just made a Gantt chart and put it in front of your leadership, I'm sure everybody would be super happy about it.
Yeah, same with bootloaders. We should implement a bootloader. It's gonna make things easier.
Yep.
And now that we have cellular,
it's gonna be important at some point. Yep. Yeah. What about so this is something, so Chris and I have both been mentioning CM4 and other things like this. Is something I ran into recently. Actually, not even recently. I've been I have been not making a lot of custom hardware in so many words. I've been using a lot of modules, a lot of breakout boards, things like that.
Like trying to get stuff done.
Yeah, there's that. I find it kind of frustrating that I haven't found a good reason to really dig in. At least some of it's just the type of work that I'm doing, but using pre-configured modules, there's so many these days, it kind of helps you to abstract some of the problem. Are you guys seeing that in your work as well? Like in my case, I was talking about the Pico, and I'm using the Pico on a board I'm working on right now, but like that same kind of thing.
I mean, we did it for the cellular modem, right? Instead of getting a cellular module and writing the driver LSL, well, I mean, there was some drivers, but instead of talking AT commands to the modem like we do for satellite, we just got the node card, the Blues.io module, and they deal with all the security, the updates, all that stuff in their end, and
SIM cards, right? SIM cards on there too, so that's nice.
It's built in, and they have a North America model and then a rest of the world model. And we didn't have to deal with any of that. And we were paying a premium, but the engineering time we saved was we wouldn't have been able to ship in time. So there are a lot of benefits of just not rolling your own, even though you lose a little bit of the control. It's usually the right call, I think.
Yeah, it depends on the particulars of the project and the volume and
volume's a big one.
What kind of module this is. Yeah. I'll mention that like on this camera, there's a LoRa radio in it as well. And for initial prototyping, we used a module, but we quickly went to building that ourselves for supply chain reasons and also to get moved to
like chip down then versus like a Hope RF style module.
Exactly.
STM32WL.
There you go.
Well, no, but we actually wanted just the radio transceiver because we wanted to do all the software on the CM4. So we didn't want a microcontroller in between the radio and the CM4.
Fancy.
Which actually made it harder to find a module because most of the modules have an MCU built in. So for that project, doing chip down made sense. The volumes were there. It was the right engineering call, but you really need to consider all these trade-offs for the particular effort you're working on.
Yeah, I think by virtue of the work that we do, it's all custom. We always are, spinning boards of our own. For a few of the projects, it will do prototypes with eval boards, and then the final product is really just those eval boards smashed together onto a custom PCB. But they had to be smashed together because this is something that's going to production, and there were size constraints, whatever. But that's only a few of the projects. Most of them, they're just, how do I put this into words? They're just way too custom, or there's some, mechanical
form factor is
constraint.
Usually a big deal.
It's a big one. Form factor, yeah.
Well defined. How about?
Yeah.
They always want it tiny, right? Like the one thing I'm working on right now, it needs to be microscopic, and I don't know how we're gonna fit it, but we're gonna figure it out. You have to go custom.
For the first time in my career, I inherited a project from another engineer. That's not first. That happens all the time. But I inherited a project from another engineer where the brief from the client was the other engineer made it too small.
Oh, what? Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Like to have to troubleshoot or something?
It was too small to easily handle and assemble into the brief they gave the previous guy was make it extremely small. So he went off and made it extremely small. And then they came
Challenge
back
accepted.
This is too small.
Wow.
So now we're making it bigger.
I guess it's a DFM type thing if you were actually like hand assembling and need to test and probe and all that other stuff too, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly the problem. Yeah. We go through, that's a lot of our work as well, is we go through DFM. Some of our projects in like the hundreds of thousands of units being manufactured now. And we were doing it all the way from early R&D. So lots of boring compromises you have to make when you go to production.
I feel like that's, if you're calling a, hardware consulting shop that, you're probably only doing it if you want to. You're not doing it just for funsies, right? You're doing it because you want to take something out in the world and you want to make it custom and make it low cost or small, whatever you guys are saying there. So that makes a lot of sense. That would be there. Yeah. I think I'm not in the high enough volume space, guys. I'm in the 5s, the 10s.
Not yet.
Yeah,
we're medium like to low because there's not a ton of buoys out there. I mean, we're probably in the high hundreds to low thousands kind of thing, more or less. So it's not enough to justify custom designs for everything.
And buoys aren't really size constrained either, I'd imagine, generally.
Ours kind of are, like they're about basketball size, the ones we're doing, but the electronics are kind of much smaller.
Oh, they're smaller than I thought. I think buoy, I think like the one that the walruses get up on, sort of thing.
No. These are pretty small. That's the nice thing about them, that we can just chuck them. We'll give them to cargo ships and they'll throw them out the back. It's kind of a fun activity for the crew to just throw them. and now we've also been throwing them out of airplanes and helicopters without a parachute. Cool. And they survive.
What is the terminal velocity of a buoy?
Oh man, I don't remember. But also,
it must be calculated at some point, though, right?
Well, we measured it more than calculated.
There was true. We have accelerometers on there.
Let's throw it out and see what happens. But
that's the difference between engineering and science.
We did write it down. We actually so we have barometric pressure sensors, and we thought about using that to calculate it, which is possible. But the problem is it started spinning around, and then you have all these weird noise artifacts. But the GPS worked great on the way down, and we're doing like 2.5 hertz update rate, and we were able to get pretty good.
What else you need? Yeah,
XYZ. But that is one of the limiting factors for the electronic size. They need to be small enough to fit into this enclosure, and you can't use too big components because they'll fly right off, or you have to glue them down, or it's a pretty high G situation just hitting the water.
That makes sense. Well, we were almost at an hour mark here, guys. What other trends are you seeing in the marketplace, or what are you excited about? I guess we've talked about the things we've been doing, the things that we've talk about often in the space. We didn't really talk too much about the shortage, but we've talked about the shortage a lot.
I'm excited about it to end.
That's true. Yeah. What else are you guys excited about? New parts, new technologies, new things in the world. What are you 2023 and beyond? What are you thinking about?
Crickets.
I have such a business.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. All right. Yep. Same here.
The future is bleak. I have such a businessy answer.
I do, like all of us have been on, I've been on the show for a while, and you guys have all been on the show. We're all getting older here,
Speak for yourself, Chris.
Well,
yeah.
Not all of us can live in the Bay Area and blood transfusions. Is that what the new hot thing is?
At best, I would be able to sell it, but I'm probably too old. I'm looking forward to Chaos Camp, hopefully, if it happens this summer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. That was a lot of fun last time. Yeah, that was 2019, I guess, right? Yeah. So Chaos Camp.
Long time ago.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think catching up with people is I mean, I keep saying that the past 3 years, but I did get I caught up with the Mighty Ohm himself when I was on my way to Tour Camp, and then Tour Camp was a lot of fun, and yeah, just catching up with folks is always nice.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I was excited about catching up with you, except you didn't go to SuperCon. You instead went to
the other one,
fancy conference. Yeah. Okay.
They didn't schedule at the same time. Wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
I have such a businessy answer to the question,
Go for it.
Chris.
Yeah.
Like specifically for Electron Labs, I am excited that we may in 2023 finally reach like the size and stability level where we could do a project of our own that isn't just for a client.
That's a big deal, though, right?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen even in 2023, to be honest, because it is really hard to do. But that would be really nice. That's kind of like a stretch goal that I'm pushing for in the back of my mind.
How are you going to source those ideas, though, too? I feel like that's, I guess, it is a good thing to think about, but it's also then, it's not just a business achievement, also a business risk. So, like, how do you actually source that idea that might be useful?
That's a big question. I think I'll let the team pitch ideas, right? As we come closer and closer to this happening, because I want everyone to be involved. I already have I haven't told them about this yet, So if they're listening, this is when they're first
No,
hearing it.
it's yeah. I was gonna say.
I have already an idea in my back pocket, but I want to be clear, this is not something where I think it's going to be something that we sell or money making. This would just be something that would be like a demonstrator, a technology demonstrator, fun for the team, something to
open source maybe sort of
Yeah,
thing.
you could, definitely.
You get to
Yeah,
build
something
skill.
to
more
market and
work,
show off.
that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like hackathon, but like a little bit more pro.
Yeah, exactly. I want to bring a DFM aspect to it because it's kind of one of the things that we specialize in. I want to make something that's not just like a fun little prototype, but that we actually take through the process of DFMing. And I hadn't thought about it much, but maybe we, document that process a little bit and make that documentation available.
He's excited about marketing, folks. Marketing.
That's why I thought I had a very businessy answer.
If
to it.
that gets people making stuff, to me, the in these kind of situations, I always end up going for the tools. Like, what is something I wish I had during the past 5 projects that would be, make things easier? And then I do this for myself, right? I'll make tools for myself, but that's usually good. Like, I would buy this for me. I'm gonna go make it.
Well, Chris, you call it marketing. I call it education. So the idea that is in my back pocket is, you guys have all seen Mark Rober's Glitter Bomb, right?
Oh yeah, yep.
And you've seen probably, like, he's done 5 videos on it now, and he said this last one was the final episode. And in the last 2 episodes, he started including the concept of car break-ins in San Francisco, and this is something that is near and dear to my heart, and probably yours too, Alvaro.
I don't have a car anymore, so
breaking into a lot of cars there.
That's one way to get rid of car break-ins, is get rid of your car. My wife had her first car break-in since moving to the city, since moving to America, and it really rattled her. And it was right about the same time as the last Mark Rober episode came out on the topic, and so it was like fresh in my mind. And I was thinking about how, like, he was unsuccessful in being able to, like, he was very successful with porch pirates, with people stealing packages from front doors, but he was largely unsuccessful with pranking, which is, I guess, the outcome, what he's really looking for. He was unsuccessful in pranking car thieves. They just didn't work out. I don't know. I don't think he spent enough time on it.
Well, they wouldn't take the really obvious.
They wouldn't take the bait. Was part of the problem. And I was trying to think about how I could basically start where he left off and make a purpose-built product that was designed to be stolen and, for lack of a better word, terrorize the car thieves. And I have some ideas about how to do that. I have to look into the legality of some of those ideas. But I was thinking that not only just make a little proof of concept and, make it into like a little video or whatever, which is cool. I want to do that as well. But like really design it with DFM in mind, where we can design it down to a price, make a little payload that can be loaded into a fake Amazon box, loaded into a fake backpack.
No blowing people up, okay? There's no.
No. All very non-lethal, all very funny pranks, nothing too serious.
But
like, put a little bit of the fear of God into these professional thieves that might make it so that they decide they don't want to do this anymore, or at least make their business model no longer profitable, because it is a business for them that would maybe then, win the streets back. I think that's something that people in this city can get behind. People in many cities.
If this worked, people would buy it.
I think people would buy it, right? Like, it's not something I want to make money off. I would just want to break even and have the good feels of knowing that we're actually striking back in a way that is both hilarious and effective and non-lethal. Very, very importantly, non-lethal and legal.
Yep.
So that's the tricky part. But yeah, that's what I was thinking, is like go through the process of actually DFMing this and showing, like, setting up a production line for a new product and designing down to a cost and designing for reliability and availability of components, putting it in the field, getting feedback on where it doesn't work, revving it, et cetera, et cetera. I think that'd be pretty good. I reckon if someone came to me with that offer, like I was just a person in a city that had car theft, and they said, hey, for like $50, you can buy this product that you put inside like a cheap $5 handbag or something and leave inside your car. Oh, well, your car's going to get broken into then. So maybe you have a work truck, right? And your tools get stolen all the time. So you leave this on the back of your work truck in like a cheap plastic toolbox. And then 5 minutes later, you're inside the worksite and you get a little text message saying your package has been stolen. And then 10 minutes after that, you get an audio recording of people inside a car with like a dye pack going off and exploding inside the car, staining the inside of their interior. And you hear the commotion that goes off. Of course, an accelerometer to make sure that the car is stationary at the time. But I think that would be well worth $50.
I think that's a buy. That's a buy right there. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
All right,
Please,
so
somebody else design this so I don't
interested
have to.
in terrorizing car thieves in 2023. Chris, what
Yeah.
about you in 2023? What are you excited about?
I'm excited to launch some new products. I've got 2 things that are done that I just need to actually put on the website and write some documentation around, and then hopefully 2 to 4 more products launching later on this year. There's been a lot in the works.
Great.
Getting more hubs.
Yeah, new version of the USB 2 hub, a new USB-C version of that,
Yes.
sort of like souped up from a speed and monitoring perspective. The 2 recurring requests I've had on the USB hub are, I want faster speed and I want better power resolution. So the new USB-C version will do both of those and some other fun things as well.
Oh, I'm gonna get a bunch for work.
Me too.
You should license Alvaro's cable tester in there too. You should add that as a little fun add-on.
It could be an add-on accessory.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the supply chain has thwarted a bunch of things that I started 2 years ago, and it seems like it's easing a bit, but definitely not out of the woods yet. And, some of this will be able to be produced because I've been buying parts over the last 2 years in anticipation of the things that I was designing over the past year and that I'll be designing early this year. But it's been horrible from a cash situation to be, buying parts for things that haven't been designed yet, because I know that these ICs are critical and that they will be in the design, but it's not an effective use of money, except that it has to be done this way in this order right now. So it's nice that things are easing a bit, but there's still big categories of products that are difficult to source. So sorry to end the show on that down note.
Supply chain.
No,
No, we're ending on new products. Yes.
New products are coming. Yeah, no, we're coming
I'm
out
also
of the woods.
interested. I'll take one. I am increasing. I just actually bought a Pine 64 board, the RISC-V with a 3-core RISC-V processor on it that runs Zephyr. So like obviously I'm on the Zephyr train, but also like I'm real pumped about RISC-V. Every time I'll read about it here, there, anywhere. There was an article about like Google targeting it for Android phones. It's like, okay, well, we'll see that when we see it. But just generally, like you guys mentioned with the the ESP32C3, like all of the parts that are coming out, I'm real jazzed about RISC-V stuff. So
Absolutely.
see where that goes.
I mean, even if you're in the ARM camp, it's just going to mean ARM's going to have to make better stuff, which means yay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's great. I haven't done anything with it yet, but I did get in the RISC-V 10-cent micro as well. The what is it? I'm trying to grab it here. Sorry. The
Like 10 cents or Tencent, the company?
10 cents. It costs 10 cents. It is the RV32, I think. RV32 V003, but it's like a super tiny 48 megahertz processor with a bunch of peripherals on it. So
Nice.
Yeah. There's not much of a tool chain for it yet, but it's real cheap.
You just put in ones and zeros.
That's right. Yeah. Well, how hard could it be? I don't think there's any Rust support for it yet. How about that?
That's awesome. At that price point, that's going to unlock so many more projects, so many more possible products.
I don't know how Admel's going to sell their AT Tinies anymore. Except for the fact that they can sell.
Yeah, they'll sell the legacy stuff, but I think people still are just comfortable with them. I don't feel like chips don't really die. They just kind of like slide into the comfort zone of certain engineers. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but the ones who are comfortable with it, they keep designing them in, and they should, right? That's a skill set that they have that they could just deploy over and over again.
Yeah,
it's just they get hosed when supply.
Yes.
When it's not prioritized for supply, then it's like, oh, okay, that's when the rubber hits the road. I feel like
oh, you didn't buy a year's worth of parts.
Yep. It's a darn shame. What about other hot button issues? AI as well. I guess is Dave just made a video about that. I'm sure we'll talk about it when Dave's back from vacation.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I mean,
all the art for this show will be using what's it called, Midjourney. So
someone posted someone using the ChatGPT style thing for Ghidra for disassembly for reverse
cool.
engineering,
Yeah.
where it will tell you what it thinks the code is doing, which that might be interesting.
Yeah, like kind of like a first guess sort of thing.
Yeah, like it tries to explain.
But what if it
Because you have
explains
disassemblers, you have
wrong?
decompilers. Sorry?
Yeah.
What if it explains wrong? Like,
I mean, it's yeah.
That's when you have to use your artificial intelligence.
But reverse
to
engineering is trial
discern.
and error. Like when you're, decompiling or disassembling, you have to make up or make guesses as to what does this variable mean, because you just know variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, and you don't really know what it does. But there are tools already to figure out, oh, this looks like a printf function, right? This signature, this assembly code looks like a printf, or it looks like a Linux syscall this or that. So I think it's going to be more of recognizing those patterns than telling you what it does. I don't know.
There is potentially value in that. I mean, there's the danger that it's slightly wrong and there's major implications to that and you don't catch it.
Yeah.
I've heard these systems described as, I think
trusting
it
it too much.
Stochastic bullshit. And that's not that far off from what they're doing, unfortunately. Like,
oh, absolutely.
There isn't a deep understanding, right? Like, it is pattern matching, and often it pattern matches wrong, and it's,
So do I, though.
Right. But at least if you're writing something, I find your mind is like formed around the thing that you're doing, and I think it is therefore easier to debug. Like, it's harder to debug someone else's code than your own code. And catching a mistake in one of these chat AI things, I think would be harder than catching a mistake in your own work or even in human generated work, because the way that they phrase things and the confidence that it has in what it's saying puts more gravitas or weight on it than I think should be there.
I think the best use that I've heard people is to kind of go back and forth with it, just to get your brain out of a spot. Like if you need ideas, if you're stuck, you can have it spit out nonsense, and maybe some of that nonsense will be like, oh, idea. And then you can go off and do a different thing. Because apparently you can have arguments with it. You can tell it to argue against your argument. And it might be yes, but it might get you thinking, like just rubber ducky 2.0. I don't know.
I guess I think there's danger in treating it as a source of truth. And
it's absolutely not.
Right. But people will treat it that way.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So you have to teach it humility so that it's a little bit less sure of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Maybe it's this. I kind of like what Alvaro was saying too. Like, I think there was a group that I was on a chat with, and they said, one of them said they used ChatGPT as a way to break writer's block, and I think that as a mental construct is actually really strong, because it's like, I'm not going to use it to write an article for me, but if I need to think about some of the things that kind of is in the zeitgeist around a topic, like that might give me some bullet points that I could, start to research and dig out of there. And like that actually was really useful in at least one case for me. That's probably the main time that I've used it so far.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I wanted to get to argue with me though, like argue with me about Ohm's law.
You're wrong, Chris.
Well, you guys will do it. Come on. I want a computer to do it.
It might.
Yeah, it might. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm really glad you guys have been here. Thank you for coming back to the show to catch up with me and talk about 2023. It's been really great to catch up with y'all, and hope you have a prosperous year.
Likewise.
Thanks for having us on.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.